Loving it. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. We have with us today a returning guest, New York Times best-selling author David Horowitz. His latest book is I Cannot Breathe, How a Racial Hoax, Hoax, is Killing America. And today, we're going to we always have a great interview when we do bring on David Horowitz, always. So today, he's raising the question, well, we're raising the question with him, what is happening with Black Lives Matter? What have they done with that, $60 million they've raised? Brother Horowitz, what's going on?
Well, Black Lives Matter is now and was from its very beginning a criminal organization. And we're not interested in Black lives. And their, what do you call it, acquiring of the $60 million and spending it on a mansion, which they bought from the Communist Party, because they're all communists, squandering that money, buying homes for yourself, when there's all these people who have suffered. Now, not all of them, in fact, this book I've written, what I did with I Can't Breathe, is I went over every major case by going up first to the Black Lives Matter website, which was kicked off by the Trayvon Martin case, which happens to be the only one I have deviated from the entire conservative movement on. I've gotten most of my hate mail from conservatives who don't like the fact that I thought that Zimmerman should have been convicted of manslaughter.
Interesting.
Yeah, because he wasn't a cop. He was a neighborhood watch person, and his instructions were not to follow people, but to call the police if he saw something suspicious and let them handle it. And he didn't do that. He stalked Trayvon Martin, and Martin turned on him. And they had a fight, and Zimmerman was losing, and he shot this kid through the heart. That deserves as severe a punishment as the law will allow, in my view.
Yes.
Black Lives Matter took this. It was just a hashtag in those days. The Patrice Colores, I think is how she goes now, who recently spent $4 million of contributions to Black Lives Matter on herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this experience when I was working with the Black Panther Party. Elaine Brown was driving around in a Mercedes, and she justified it by, Black leaders have to be honored by Mercedes-Benzes as white leaders. In my view, if you're trying to serve poor communities and victim communities, you don't need a Mercedes-Benz, whether you're white or Black.
Yes.
That's not a color issue, but they justify everything that way. We have to live like kings. And you see it, in dictators. They always, like the Castro communists, when they took over, in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas, when they took power, the first thing they did was kick the rich out of their homes and make them their homes.
Yes.
And that tells you what their true principles are. I mean, they could have put poor people in them if they wanted to do something like that, but no, they put themselves in it.
And Mugabe, I mean, my Lord, it was like a hypocrisy.
Yeah, he's a monster. And all of them were monsters. I mean, it has nothing to do with color. It has to do with ideology. If you think you're saving the world, what crime would you not commit and what lie would you not tell? And they do. They believe their own propaganda.
And they were very open. Black Lives Matter founders are very open about we're Marxists. We hate America. We want to destroy America. I mean, do I have that right?
Absolutely. We are trained Marxists. There's no Marxism. I mean, this is so stupid. This is so low level. I mean, it's so ironic. We live in a time when a whole new generation of Black leaders has emerged who are articulate and intelligent. And you have these very low level people who will lie at the drop of a hat. Let me start with why my book is called Our Racial Hoax is Killing America.
Okay.
Let's start first with the mythology that George Floyd was killed, that there was a racial element to the George Floyd killing, that this was white supremacy in action. Derek Chauvin was married to a Black woman. I mean, yeah, you didn't know that.
No, I did not.
Yeah, well, that shows you the real problem, which is our corrupt media that doesn't report these things, and a stupid conservative media that doesn't know how to fight the political wars. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is Keith Ellison, as you know, was a spokesman for Louis Farrakhan, the most notorious racist in the country, and the most powerful. That's the biggest racist movement. For 11 years, he was a spokesman for Farrakhan. Wow. He's a far left. He's a supporter of Antifa, this fascist organization that beats up people and kills them, pretending that that Antifa is the anti-fascist. So Keith Ellison was the Attorney General of the state of Minneapolis. I mean, when you hear people talk about America as a white supremacist society, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Everybody involved in Minnesota, where George Floyd was killed or died, I'm positive that he died of a drug overdose. He had 4 times the lethal level of fentanyl in his body, and he was screaming, "I can't breathe," when a cop wasn't even touching them, way before Chauvin put his knee on his neck. Everybody's a leftist. The police chief is a Black leftist. The council has 12 Democrats. And the leader of the city council is Keith Ellison's son, a Black Democrat. 12 of the 13 are Democrats, and the 13th is a Green Party member. That's the police department that's supposed to be police brutality, systemic racism. That's just baloney.
Right.
I'll tell you why there's no systemic racism in a second. And by the way, everything that I'm saying, well, I didn't actually know that Derek Chauvin's wife was Black until recently. But everything else is in my book, I Can't Breathe. Keith Ellison was interviewed, as the Minnesota Attorney General, he's the chief prosecutor on the Derek Chauvin George Floyd case. And 60 Minutes had him on and asked him if there was a racial element. If there was a racial element in the death of George Floyd. And Keith Ellison said, "No, we couldn't find one. We looked, but we couldn't find. If this guy couldn't find a racial element, it wasn't there." And actually, the first clue is, and one of these guys there's 3 cops now on trial for aiding and abetting Chauvin. One of them's Black, young Black man who joined the force to reform it. So, and another is Asian. So where's the racial element? So
let me stop you right there, Mr.
Riots that was stoked by Black Lives Matter criminals was a complete hoax. There is no systemic racism in police. There are 18,000 police departments. How do I know this? Because systemic racism, institutional racism, is outlawed by the 1964 Civil Rights Act, also the 14th Amendment and the Constitution, but it wasn't enforced before the 1964 Act. So if there was systemic racism in police departments in this country, there would be a tsunami of lawsuits. When you consider all the black district attorneys, all the mayors of these cities that erupted in violence are black, black Democrats, all of them. It's crazy. So there would be, and people would be making billions of dollars in legal suits if there was, but there isn't. There's been, I think it's the greatest social revolution in the history of the world in the last 50 years. But the left never wants to take yes for an answer.
That's right.
It's insanity. Barack Obama was elected with a majority of white votes, in the people who elected him. Everybody wished, that we would move into a new era where there wasn't racism. And now, ironically, the rampant racism is against white people. Every white person is guilty of being a white supremacist, whether they mean it or not. It's just, it's hard to articulate this. And I hold the media and also Republican politicians who just pussyfoot around these issues. It's just terrible.
Right.
So my book studied 26 cases, and there are a couple of tragic incidents. The killing of Tamir Rice. If you read, but I went up, I looked at all the news reports and sources, left and right, and this was a tragic incident. Tamir Rice was didn't look like a 12-year-old. I forget, he was 5'11" and weighed 200 pounds or something. And he was flashing this replica. It looks just like the real thing, a replica of a pistol in a park, and scaring people. And the officers who came to the scene were not told by the dispatcher that the person said he's flashing this gun. We don't know if it's a real gun or not. And the officers asked him to show, he had his hand in his belt, and they asked him to raise his hands and show, in other words, that he wasn't a threat to them. Right. And maybe he didn't understand the command, but he reached in and pulled it out, and they shot him. And they went over, they tried to resuscitate him. They would, you have the officers weeping over what's happened. I mean, these things happen. Yes. Why are there so many black cases? First of all, there's no statistic, none, that shows that blacks are more the victims, unarmed blacks, of police shootings than whites. Quite the contrary. There's usually about twice as many whites that are shot. And in this video of white guys, there's one horrific video of a white guy on his knees begging them not to shoot him. He's unarmed. He says, "I'm unarmed. Please don't kill me." They kill him. Wow. And and that it caused no ripples. It didn't cause the burning down of cities or anything like that. The worst case, the Ahmaud Arbery case, which was the jury decided right of putting those guys in jail. But they weren't on the force. This wasn't the police force in action. These were, the father was an ex-cop, but the guy who shot him was never a cop. So, it's just, and the leaders of BLM are so wicked, is the only way I could describe them. Here's a case they had. Tony McCabe was a transgendered person, and a mental case, as you'll see in a moment, in California. And he had an affair with a white woman. And that white woman had a black son who was 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
One day, this loon, McCabe, pistol whipped the woman, the mother of the son, and so her family, including the son, beat the crap out of him. So he made a video that's on the internet saying, I'm going to kill those, I'm going to kill them. And when I do it, I'm going to take a gun because I don't want to have to deal with police anymore. I'm sick of this life. And I know they'll shoot me. And he went over and he stabbed to death the black son, who was 21 years old.
Wow.
And drew his gun and was shot and killed by the cops. And Black Lives Matter has held 5 years of demonstrations to protest this because he's an oppressed individual, because he's transgendered and black. With just a crazy guy who should have been in an institution. It's a tragic case, but there's no excuse for what Black Lives Matter did. And they stoke up. Why are so many cops being killed today? That's Black Lives Matter did that.
Yes.
You drum up this hatred for cops, no evidence. And it goes right up to the White House. Joe Biden is talking about systemic racism touching every area. No evidence. He doesn't give any evidence.
That's correct.
Is there a case? And if you look at the videos in the George Floyd case, he was not arrested by Chauvin. He was arrested by the black cop and the Asian. No, it was a white cop and the black cop. And they're so solicitous of him. The guy's out of his gourd because he's so high on fentanyl. He's screaming. He can't follow a command for, put your hands on the steering wheel for 3 minutes. He's screaming resisting them when they tried to put him in the police car. And he's screaming, I'm claustrophobic. But when they arrested him, he was sitting in a car doing drugs. He was hysterical and out of control. And there's no evidence that these cops intended to. You look how they called an ambulance, they tried to save him. So these are monstrous injustices. And then, of course, there was no fair trial. Maxine Waters going into the state and saying, guilty, guilty, guilty. And the president of the United States saying he's praying for the right decision, which is, and then people intimidating the jurors, including the media. You have what Black Lives Matter did, its achievement is to create a national lynch mob. First the verdict and the punishment, and then you can do the investigation. They had these cops convicted before the autopsy.
And this is why I say to people, it is so, say to my listeners first and foremost, and then the people of Louisville and the Commonwealth, Kentucky, it's so important for us to be in touch with scholars, researchers, intellectuals like yourself. Folks, I'm talking to my listeners. I'm talking to you. You've got to get this book by David Horowitz, I Cannot Breathe, How a Racial Hoax is Killing America. Notice several times that Mr. Horowitz said what? No evidence. He's looking for evidence. He's looking for evidence. And go ahead.
Let me just briefly do Breonna Taylor. I mean, here's somebody that Oprah Winfrey, and I am so disappointed in Oprah Winfrey. I mean, here is a woman who's an example that the civil rights movement won. She was brought up in racist Mississippi. That's that she was raised as a child. She was raped by her uncle. Her father was a sharecropper. She's the richest woman in America. Why? She didn't get government handouts to be the richest woman in America.
Right.
She took the star of afternoon TV, Phil Donahue,
Mm-hmm.
beat his pants off. You think
That's
Phil
right.
Donahue said, "Yeah, I want to give up this multi-million-dollar job so a black woman can take my place"? I don't think so.
Right.
She won the hearts and minds of millions of white middle class women who'd never been to a sensitivity training session. But now she's joined this racist mob. 26 billboards she took out for Breonna Taylor,
Yes, correct.
calling for these police to be charged, obviously with murder, because that's what the lynch mob wanted. 26 billboards because she was 26 years old. I think a billboard costs at least $10,000. Not that it would matter to Oprah. She's a multi-billionaire. My
Yes.
wife got her Valentine's flowers. A multi-billionaire. But calling for these cops lost their jobs. What happened? Breonna Taylor, and always described as a health technician. She hadn't worked in 3 years. She was an accomplice to a major drug dealer in Louisville, a guy whose business was poisoning black people. That's what it's about.
Yes.
So that's who Breonna Taylor. I mean, look, the heart can trick you. She evidently was in love with this guy, make you make really bad decisions. But that doesn't mean the rest of us shouldn't recognize the bad decision. She used her bank account to hide his criminally gotten money. She used her address as one of his distribution centers, which is why the police came to that. She rented a car for him in which a corpse showed up. Why is she dead? She's dead because the police trying to do a service to the black community by getting this drug dealer out of their veins, organized raids on 5 houses, all of which they suspected to be drug distribution centers for this guy. It happens that there were no drugs in her house at that time. They knocked on the door. They had a no-knock warrant, but they didn't use it. They knocked on the door after midnight when it was dark. She was in bed with a new boyfriend. And this jerk, when he heard the police say it's the police, open up, maybe he was ginned up by all these attacks on police. But anyway, he took his weapon and in the dark and fired at the cops and wounded one.
Yes.
These are guys who want to go home to their wives and children.
Right.
And they have a saying when that happens, pray and spray. You just hope you kill the guy who was trying to kill you. You can't see. And evidently this boyfriend didn't warn Breonna Taylor not to step into the hallway. That's how she died.
Yes.
And then the city of Louisville gave her $12 million in a wrongful death suit. No evidence of a wrongful death, none.
Yeah, and the officer who is wounded in that whole situation, he's put out a book recently. I'm trying to get him on my podcast. I've exchanged a couple of emails with him, but we do have. We're looking to bring on a local police officer, Louisville police officer, Dexter Pitts. Actually, we've interviewed him a couple of times, and he's put up.
I'd like to send these guys my book, and then maybe you can get them on if you say you've had me on. And you show them.
Well, I can make that happen. Dexter Pitts.
Cops wouldn't trust anybody these days.
Well, we can definitely make that happen. Dexter Pitts, he's in touch with those officers, and so if you can send me an autographed copy.
What I need is, how do I need? Do we have your contacts?
I will email
Birth,
that to your people.
birth of Elizabeth, because it'll come from Elizabeth.
Okay, we'll work that out. And like I say, Dexter Pitts will be working with us on that. He's put out a book, an autobiography, I Am Pitts, and he was here. And I'm looking forward to having you, the two of you, together on a show, because you gave some great insights, and he can give some additional insights. And Mr. Horowitz, believe it or not, there are not that many people right here in the city of Louisville who have the courage and the integrity to point out the facts that you do, at least to publicly point out those facts. When I spoke to some people in law enforcement, I said, well, how did she get shot and her boyfriend didn't? They said, Corbin, the forensics going to show she was in front. She was out in the line of fire, and he started shooting. So who do you think is going to get hit? But people won't.
And actually, the drug dealer said he was a jerk.
Yes, they did, and I have a copy of the transcript. What you said, Mr. Horowitz, exactly right. They said if he hadn't doing the shooting, Brianna, or they called her Bree, wouldn't be dead today. But you don't hear those facts being brought out here in Louisville because, well, you know.
You've got racist prosecutors, and I think their mayor is bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to need to cut the interview short. Once again, powerful stuff. Love having you on. You're one of my most favorite guests. Folks, this is
a mission. You got to get the word out. You've got the
absolutely. Folks, this is David Horowitz, a returning guest, New York Times bestselling author. His latest book is I Cannot Breathe, How a Racial Hoax is Killing America. I know you can get copies there at Amazon.com. Please go there and get that. And Mr. Horowitz, I hope we can have you on again soon, and with Dexter Pitts as the two of you together.
We have a minute. I can add something.
Sure, please.
Okay, yeah. So for people who are interested in this phenomenon of the left being criminal gangs and exploiting Black people, I wrote an autobiography called Radical Son, and in it I described my relations with Huey Newton. I raised a lot of money for the Black Panther Party. And I remember I describe actually a scene with Huey in his penthouse. Turns up the volume on to block the FBI. I mean, it's all drama. And he said to me, he said, and I think he was trying to warn me because I was just naive to the extreme. He said, David, he said, he described a scene from the John Dillinger movie where Dillinger can escape. He gets to the Mexican border and he says, and he turns around and doesn't flee into Mexico where he would have been safe. And he explains it by saying, I'm looked up to by all these kids and young people now. If I go to Mexico, nobody will be interested in me. They'll all forget about me. That showed what his motivation was. And Huey said, when I was growing up, I knew that if I couldn't be a revolutionary, I wanted to be a bank robber.
Wow. Folks, we're going to end it right there. And again, Mr. Horowitz, thanks for coming on. We're looking forward to you coming on again sometime with our local Dexter Pitts.
These issues anytime,
Yeah.
and to discuss them with the enemy also.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We'll be in touch.